Hello, if anybody's there, just a moment while I get the lighting sorted out. Not going to work. Sorry, I have some trouble remembering how to turn it on. That's going to be better. Maybe that's going to be a little better. Okay, right. I see there are some people there. Okay. Working from home, it's a terrible thing. Okay, before we get properly started, I'll just wait and see if a few more people tune in. As I said, I into the link and turn it on, but we're only a couple of minutes late, so hopefully we'll be all right. Okay. Obviously, this is supposed to be the final lecture on the course. I'm hoping that it's going to be possible to do a meeting before we do a final test, before we do an test exam, let's say. But that's going to depend on your timetables. And since you're all doing different subjects, the timetables could be, they will be different, which could be a bit of a problem. I don't know how we're going to resolve that, but I'll have to discuss that with secretaries. Okay. Maybe someone could just send me a quick message to say that you can hear something and that everything is okay. I know that the picture is not very good, but the bright window in front of me, I'm not sure what I can do about that. I can really help, does it? Actually here, that would be good. And that we have actually, we are actually starting. No? Could anybody send a message? Ah, okay, right, there is a message. Thank you, Martin, thank you. Yeah, okay, good, right. So what I want to do today, I'm just quickly going to go through the, was it 4 lectures? 5 lectures, maybe, that were part of the second part of the course. I'm not going to go through the lecture on will and shall. That was something separate, which is not part of the final test, so you don't need to worry about that. But if anybody has any questions about that, you can ask those. So I've uploaded to the website the exercises that I want to use in this lecture. So I don't know whether everybody's seen them, or maybe I should put the maybe I'll put the link to those on here so that you can see. I just do that. It's as I said, it's on the website. We could possibly that one possibly that one. Okay. Okay. So this, if you haven't seen it already, I've just sent the link for the exercises that we're going to use today. Okay. So I will use those exercises just as a way of going through things that we've done. I've noticed from the videos that obviously, unless you all sit in big groups, you have parties to get together to watch these lectures, then there must be a lot of people who haven't watched them. But well, anyway, that's their problem. As you probably will have noticed if you did look at the videos, that I had a serious problem with needing a haircut as time went on, and so I had to stop making videos because I looked ridiculous. Finally, my barber reopened, and it's not so bad. Possibly you had the same problems. Anyway, so that's kind of partly why I switched to doing just audio recordings, although really, I don't know, audio recordings. Anyway, okay, so what I want to do, I'll just ask at the beginning whether there are any particular topics that anybody wants to pay special attention to. Okay, pay special attention to. Okay. Otherwise, I should just begin with the first set of exercises. So the first set of exercises that we had we covered, what did we cover in the first set? So this was exercise set 7 was the first set of exercises for this. So that covered, there was some stuff about the passive voice. So I don't really intend to say anything today about the passive voice, simply because there isn't much to say about it. I mean, actually making passives is something that you would do in your practical grammar classes. And I think that everything that was said during the lecture is pretty straightforward. There isn't really anything to check. But if anybody wants me to say something about passives, I can do. The other thing that we had was about multi-word verbs, which was something a little more interesting, and also about different types of adverbs. So I want to say a bit about multi-word verbs. So we had the distinction between prepositional verbs and phrasal verbs. And as you probably know, people normally talk about phrasal verbs, and prepositional verbs don't get mentioned very much. And obviously in prepositional verbs, there is a preposition, and that's why they're prepositional. Okay? And this is an illustration of one of the reasons why it's worth doing a course in descriptive grammar, because there is a difference in the practical usage of prepositional and phrasal verbs. And if you don't know anything about descriptive grammar, it's quite difficult to explain what that difference is or where that difference comes from. And there are, of course, some examples where you just kind of have to learn whether it's prepositional or phrasal. But as I said in the lecture at the time, there are ways of working out what's going on. So if you can, open the exercises for today. So descriptive grammar part 2. Exercise is the same as we had during the class. Replace the object of the sentence with a pronoun. Okay. So if everybody can have a look at that. Get it right. Okay, so there are 5 examples here. So if you remember, prepositional phrases, obviously the preposition wants to stay with the noun. That's what prepositions do. So it won't want to get separated from the noun. But in phrasals, when we have a pronoun, it always goes in the middle. Okay. So if we look at the first example, we have write out your notes. Okay, and notes, of course, that notes is a plural. So either we're going to say write out them or write them out. Okay, and what we want to say is write them out. Okay, write out your notes, write them out. So the them comes between the write and the out, comes before the second part, which tells us that the out here is not a preposition, right? Which again, it fits with the pattern that I talked about, because when we say write out something, there isn't anything out about this, right? There isn't any kind of literal meaning of out here. We mean write them out on a piece of paper, write them out again. Okay. Number 2 is break up a fight. Okay, so again, either we can say break up it or break it up. Okay, but again, we should be able to see that up here doesn't have any kind of literal meaning of upness. Okay, so to break up just means to break. Yeah, so break up a fight will be break it up. Okay, get over is a slightly more confusing one, slightly trickier. So get over her death. So get over her death here, obviously get over means recover from something. Which here we might well first of all think, well, the over is not literal. We're not actually going over anything. So it should be get it over. But that would be wrong. Okay, so this example is not get it over, but get over it. So with get over, this has different uses. Get over something. And here, it's the thing which comes after it here, the death here, or it could be an illness or so on, is treated as an obstacle, something in the way, and something which therefore needs to be, which we need to get over. right? As though there was something normally in the way, right? Whereas when we say when we want to get something finished, then to get something over would be, then we would say get it over. Here, the over would have a less literal meaning. Okay, but to some extent, as I said, you do just have to learn these. It isn't such a simple case that they're always just, as I said, that you will always be able to tell what was literal and what was not literal. Okay, it's a little more complicated. The fourth one, though, should be easy. Okay, because we're talking about going into the river. So you are actually in the river at the end. So clearly this into is working as a normal preposition, right? So it's going to be fall into it. Okay, so fall into, you might say, well, it's not really a fixed kind of expression at all, right? You can say that. Okay, so fall into it. And take over a company. So again, when we talk about a takeover, one company taking over another company, this over is non-literal kind of use. So we would say take it over. Okay? So does anybody have any questions connected with the difference between phrasal phrasal verbs and prepositional verbs? So that most of the time you don't need to know this difference. And of course, you've been using these expressions for years and not knowing this difference in all likelihood. So it's not something that's a big problem when you are using the language. However, as I said, there are differences in use. That there is this difference of whether the two things can come apart and the pronouns go in between the two. And then there is a question of why is it like that with some and why is it not like that with others. Okay. So if you can tell that something is very literal, like the into, then you know that it's going to be a preposition. If something is completely has no connection with what actually happens, then you can be pretty sure that it isn't, right? That it's a particle. We're not going to get into what particles are. Particle is a section of grammar which is quite complicated, and people kind of use the word particle about all sorts of words which don't fit anywhere else. So we're not going to worry too much about that. But as I said, there are some where you simply have to learn which it is. Okay. So let me know if there are any questions about that. Otherwise, I shall move on to the second part of that first lecture in the second part of the course, which was about adverbs. Yeah. Okay. So we had three types of adverbs: adjuncts, conjuncts, and disjuncts. All right. And I said at the time, I think this is very easy. Shouldn't cause a problem for anybody. So adjuncts are adverbs which are really describing the verb. Conjuncts connect with another sentence or another clause, and disjuncts giving the verb. Conjuncts connect with another sentence or another clause, and disjuncts give us comment, an opinion, something like that, about the sentence. Okay. If anybody has any question about those distinctions, let me know. Okay, send me in a question. Otherwise, I'll just go through this exercise so we can see how it works. Again, as I said, this is normally something that's quite simple for everyone to grasp. So in the exercise, we've got the first example, subsequently she agreed to marry me. And this should be a very obvious case where subsequently clearly refers to something which happened before. You can't simply start a conversation with the word subsequently, so this must be a conjunct. Okay. Number two, they have been helpful recently. So here we have typical use of an adverb to describe when. So here it describes when they were helpful. Yeah? Recently being a word which you can use with have been, even though we're talking about when something happened. So this is a simple adjunct. Okay. Number three, if I can move on already. Number three, incredibly, I passed first time. So obviously, incredibly, this is my comment on the fact that I passed first time. Yeah. So this is obviously going to be, that should be, again, that should be pretty easy for everybody, I hope. The next one is something which is a little more tricky because of the way that I've done it, right? So I'm just checking someone's keeping track of who's saying hello, that everybody's here. So I have noticed, don't worry. Okay, so shyly she moved closer to me. Now here we've got shyly as the first word in the sentence on its own with a comma. So it looks like the number 3. But here the shyly refers to the way which she moved, right? So it's a normal adjunct. So a normal adjunct can come at the beginning in the same way. Okay. Oddly enough, I never saw her again. Number 5. So oddly enough, I never saw her again. Here, oddly enough, is my comment, okay, on the fact that I never saw her again, that I think it's strange. Okay, so I think it's odd. So that is disjunct. Of course, again, we could also look, I'm thinking of oddly enough with this one, but again would be an adjunct. It's a normal adverb. Number 6, she looked at me hopefully, right? So here, this is the way she looked at me. So it's an adjunct. It describes the way that she's looking at me. Okay, that should be simple. Whereas number 7, okay, we have the same word of the. This expresses my opinion, right? This is expressing my hope. So hopefully we'll be home by tea time. Means I hope we'll be home by tea time. And so here, hopefully is a disjunct. It's my opinion. Okay, number 8, you'll have to tell him nonetheless. Okay, nonetheless, nevertheless, doesn't matter which, you can use either, doesn't really make any difference. But these are both words which refer back to what was said before. So it'll have to be, I don't want to tell him. Well, you'll have to tell him nonetheless. So this is a conjunct because it always links back to what was there before. It doesn't make any, it doesn't have any meaning on its own, nonetheless. If you don't know what it is you're referring to, it doesn't have it. Okay, number 9, thus, it is impossible for me to stay. Okay, so this thus here is also a conjunct referring back to what there must have been some reason given earlier, which is why it's impossible for me to stay. Okay, and number 10, we have luckily, but notice it's in commas, which is another giveaway. Roberts was luckily at home. This is, I mean, you could argue that this could be used as an adjunct, that she was at home in a lucky way. But that's a slightly odd thing to say. Much more likely, I'm using this as a disjunct, and I'm saying that I think it's lucky that Mrs. Roberts was at home. Okay, so the disjunct can come in the middle of the sentence. That's the point of this. Okay. All right. Are there any questions about adjuncts, conjuncts, or disjuncts? No, because it's very, very easy, of course. Like most of the things on this course. Very easy, of course. Like most of the things on this course. Very easy. To come back with it at any time, we don't have to address all questions in order. So that was all in the first lesson that we had. And then in the second one, was it that we looked at the theme? So the theme, just the beginning of the sentence, what's at the beginning. So that's not difficult to identify. We just need to make sure that we're looking not for a single word at the beginning, but we're looking for a part of the sentence which is going to come at the beginning. Okay, that's what's important. Okay, so it could be 1 or 2 words. It could be a much longer phrase. So we're looking for the function of the theme. Okay? Or adjective, That's not the function. We're looking for the function within the sentence. And I want you to try to just think about the way that these sentences are said, to understand that the way that word order can change in English, the word order can move around. Okay. So the first one, we say the cat we always put out for the night. Okay. So this would very often be used as a contrast, right? So the dog lives here, but the cat we always put out for the night. So of course, here the subject is going to be we, right? We, and the verb is put out. So the cat here is a direct object of put out. So the function of the theme is direct object. The cat is the theme, and it's the direct object of put out. Okay. So we can see that it's not so unusual, not so strange for an object to be put at the beginning of the sentence. It's quite normal. Okay. The second one, quite beautiful she was that first day. So of course here we've got she, yeah, and we've got the verb to be, was. So we know that we're not going to need an object. We're going to need a complement. So quite beautiful is the description of she. Yeah. So quite beautiful will be subject complement. Yeah. We've got she as a subject, quite beautiful as a subject complement, and quite beautiful. Both of those words together are the theme. Okay. The third one, so mad. She made me after that. So here you would look at the original, what the basic form of the sentence would be, she made me so mad. Okay? So the so mad describes me. Okay, me is clearly the object, she is the subject. So mad, all of that is the description of me. So all of that is the object complement. Okay? So you should see straight away that this is a standard, typical English sentence, and the first part is the guide, and the guide is the subject of the verb form will show. Okay, so this is a typical theme. The subject is the theme of the sentence. Okay, and the last one, these are the ones which sometimes trip people up. Forgive that woman, I would not. So you will remember that, of course, I is a subject, and then we've got would, which is the auxiliary. Okay, so when we move everything except the subject and the auxiliary, we put everything in front. The rest of the sentence, forgive that woman, is the predication. Okay, so would not forgive that woman, all of that would be the predicate of I, the subject, but forgive that woman is the predication. Okay, and again, you think about the way that you say it. That someone would say, well, you ought to forgive her, and you say, forgive that woman, I would not. Right? So again, that might sound a little odd to you, but the point is that it's possible to do it, and sometimes it happens. And so we need to recognize what's happened here. What's happened here is that the predication has been put as the theme of the sentence. Okay, so here we've got two things that I'd just like to check that's okay with you. So the idea of the theme, this should be pretty simple. Let me just move slightly. The idea of the theme should be pretty simple because it's just the first part of the sentence, right? So that shouldn't cause anybody any problems. It's important that you do understand the idea of the function of the sentence, and we have talked about that quite a lot. If you have problems understanding what the function of the sentence is, then you're going to have problems with the final test, because the final test will have several exercises which discuss the function of the sentence. Okay, so it's very important that you know what the function of the sentence means. Okay, whether you can always work it out or not is another question. Some of them I might try to make difficult for you to work out, but what's important is that you know what it means, so you know roughly what's going on. Okay. Sometimes it's always the case that some people in the exercise where I ask for the function, some people will put parts of speech. Other people will just put very vague functions like complement, but they won't say what sort of complement it is, which is not really good enough. Okay. So it's important that you know what the functions are and that you have some idea of how to recognize. Okay, I don't have any questions on that. No, so I understand that the people who are here today watching are those who are the dedicated, committed students who know exactly what's going on, so they don't need to ask too many questions. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we looked at in the lectures was about modifiers. We had a couple of things about modifiers. The main thing that I want to talk about with modifiers is about restricted and non-restricted. Restrictive and non-restrictive. Okay, and then we've also got one exercise on the post and pre-modification. Restrictive, non-restrictive should be, again, a very simple thing. It's because it has a big impact on what the adjective is for, what the modifier is for, what it's actually doing there, right? So either the modifier is telling us which thing we're talking about, or it's telling us something about the thing which we already know we're talking about. Okay. So when we look at the examples, we've got some of these. We've got two. Yeah. So we've got in the first example, his foolish young wife. Okay. So with a word like wife, we don't use modifiers usually, unless it's my first wife, my second wife, something like that. Then we don't use modifiers in a restrictive fashion, because we assume when you just use the word wife that there is one wife and you don't need to say which one it is. So any modifier that goes with a word like that is likely to be non-restrictive. So foolish and young here are both non-restrictive, unless you live in a country where it's possible to have many wives, in which case possibly you would use them in a restrictive fashion. But let's just take the normal, the most likely use. Okay. The second one, my blue striped shirt. Okay. Presumably, people have more than one shirt, usually. And the fact that there are two modifiers used suggests that both of them are necessary. If you only had one blue shirt, then you'd be unlikely to say my blue striped shirt and add the extra information that it's striped. I mean, maybe it's possible, but it doesn't seem much point. So probably you need to say that it's a blue shirt and you need to say that it's a striped shirt so that I know which shirt you're talking about. So both of these are restricted. Okay, there are many shirts, and I need to say which one exactly. Okay. Number three, that weird family that moved into Mrs. Robinson's house. Now, again, very often it's possible to interpret these in more than one way, in the sense that it could be that lots of families moved into Mrs. Robinson's house. I want to say that I'm talking about the weird one. But when I wrote this example, I was assuming that it's one house for one family, and that I'm just saying that the family that moved into Mrs. Robinson's house is weird, therefore it's being used in a non-restrictive fashion. But as I said, well, you could make an argument. The important thing is that you understand what the difference is. So if you want to interpret it in a different way, that's fine. You just need to tell me why, because you understand what the difference is. Three cats stood before me, the smallest one crying. Okay, so when you've got a word like smallest, okay, that's always going to be used restrictively, because that is a way of identifying. I mean, we use comparatives, but particularly we use superlatives to identify one thing, one thing which is the best, one thing which is the biggest or the smallest. So this is obviously a restrictive use. Okay. Similarly, when I say something like the old car, not the new one, and I'm contrasting two different things, then again, these must be restrictive. Okay, because the whole point is that we're discussing which thing it is I'm talking about. So whenever we're trying to define which thing we're talking about, then the use will always be restricted. Okay, so these are kind of clues that you should be able to spot. And the sixth one, my beautiful best friends. Okay, so here's a classic example where we've got one of each type, best as I said, superlative forms are always going to be restrictive. My best friend, which friend, my best friend. And beautiful is clearly a description of your best friend, right? So this is non-restrictive. Okay? So this shouldn't cause too many problems so long as you understand the difference. Restrictive things tell us which one, non-restrictive modifiers give us more information about something which we have already identified. Okay, are there any questions about that? Probably not. It's very simple. Okay, before we come on to the final exercise, I just want to mention there are other exercises which were on the during the other lectures that I talked about, which we haven't really worried too much about. So now I just realised that the theme part came from was it lecture 10? Yeah, so we did something from that. I don't have any exercises here from lecture 11. So from exercise set 10, purely because that was, well, I think that's quite simple. So it may be, if someone does have any questions about ellipsis or clefting or existential there, then again, please ask them. But we've just, that was the one that we've just done. So I only posted the answers to that yesterday, maybe. So it seems a bit silly to do a revision of it. You can just go back and look at that again. So I'll just do the last topic. Now, the last exercise where we have the pre-modifiers and post-modifiers, this is my favorite exercise. Okay, I like this exercise because it contains some creativity, and I like my students to be creative. It also shows some skill at manipulating the English language, which is really what is the ultimate aim of, at least for me, of teaching you descriptive grammar, so that you're better able to understand the way the language works and put it together. Okay. I've just realized that, yeah, the version that I've given you, I think there's a tiny small mistake, because in the instructions for this final exercise, it says put pre-modifiers into the right order to form one phrase with pre-modifiers and head. The first line, it should just say put the modifiers in the right order, okay? Because the whole point is that you need to make them into pre-modifiers before you put them in the right order. So in fact, some of them are kind of already in pre-modifier order, some of them are not. Okay, so very simple distinction. Pre-modifiers, of course, pre means it comes before. So it comes before the noun that is modifying, and post-modifying means it comes after the noun. So that should be pretty simple. And as I said during the lecture, pre-modifiers tend to be simple forms, individual, sometimes hyphenated adjective forms. Sometimes it's a noun, which sometimes forms a compound noun, whereas post-modification tends to be done with little phrases. Okay. English doesn't like using phrases to pre-modify. There are occasions when we use a single adjective to post-modify, but these tend to be special occasions, and it tends to suggest that the modification is only true temporarily. Okay. Okay. So, as I said, I like this exercise very much. So I'd always put an exercise like this in all of my tests and exams, and my students usually don't like that very much because they find it difficult. So this is very much the exercise which, if you want to get a good mark, you have to get at least something for this, right? Because there's always going to be something like this, and people who don't really know what's going on often don't get anything at all for this. So this often makes the difference between those who just learn the basics and those who really understand what's going on. So just to recap, as I said in the lecture, we've got a head noun, and we've got some modifiers. We want them to be pre-modifiers, which means they must come before the head noun, which means the head noun must be the final word in the phrase. Okay? Nothing can come after the head noun. So once you've identified what the head noun is, you can just put it right at the end of the page, and you know that nothing will come after it. Nothing can come after it. Okay? And then you look for things which can come at the beginning. So articles, come at the beginning. Numbers come at the beginning. Okay, so articles and other determiners, of course, as well. And of course, if you have a predeterminer, that will come pre the determiner. So those kinds of words come at the beginning. The noun itself comes at the end, and any other nouns which are being used to pre-modify will come right next to that noun. Okay, and that leaves you the space in the middle for adjectives, which, as I tried to explain during the lecture, these adjectives move from the least integral to the object to the most integral to the object. So it begins with opinions, random ideas, accidents that are connected with this object, and it ends with things which are most essential to describing what the object actually is. Okay, which normally is not a big problem to do, because in any normal sentence you won't get very many modifiers which are of the same type, right? Normally, when you do get more than one modifier, there is one opinion and maybe one origin or one material modifier. Some of the examples here, however, I've made a little more difficult for you to actually see what the modifier should be, but that's just to make it more fun. I hope you enjoy that sort of challenge. Okay, so the first example was 3 buckets made of iron badly damaged. Okay, so we immediately recognize that we've got buckets, and that's going to be the head noun, which means it comes last. Okay, we've also got a number 3, so that's going to come at the beginning. We don't have any other determiners in here, so we know we've got 3 something buckets. Okay, we've only got 2 things here. Badly damaged. Okay, so that's already in pre-modifier form. We don't need to change that. And then we've got made of iron. Okay, so we don't want to use a phrase like made of iron. In some instances, with different verbs on different types of modifier, you might want to say, well, it's, I don't know. So if you had made at home, then you would change it to homemade, right? But with materials are made of iron, we don't need to keep the verb, so it's enough just to say iron. So we end up with 3. So we've got iron and we've got badly damaged. Well, obviously, iron is more integral to the object than badly damaged. Badly damaged is an accident which has happened to the object. So we get 3 badly damaged iron buckets. Simple. Very simple. Okay, second example. My red new jacket, real leather, made in China. Okay. So again, we look for the head noun and we see we've got jacket. Okay. And if you're very clever, you might notice straight away that there is the possibility here for a common compound noun, a common type of jacket, which of course is leather jacket, right? If you like motorcycling or rock and roll music or something, you may have a leather jacket. Okay, and we've got a determiner, we've got my. So it's going to be my something jacket. We can see it's going to be my something leather jacket. So what's going to come in between? Well, we've got new and we've got made in China. Okay. Now, made in China, again, you could say something like Chinese made, but that would be a bit unnecessary. So we can just change made in China to Chinese. Why not? So we've got this jacket. It's a leather jacket. It's Chinese and it's new. Okay. So Chinese being part of the description and new being something which is temporarily true, right? Because soon it will no longer be a new jacket. Depending on who you are, it might take, if you're like me, you can have something for a few years and still think of it as new. However, there are some people who, after 1 or 2 weeks, no longer think of their clothes as new. You may be one of those. So we end up with my, oh, I forgot red. Yes, I forgot red. So red, obviously, is a part of the physical description of the jacket. And as such, it's going to come in the middle. So we're going to get my new red Chinese leather jacket. Okay. So we might wonder, well, why is the Chinese, why is that after the red? Well, origin adjectives generally come near the end. They come after physical descriptions, which may seem slightly strange, but that's one little quirk perhaps of the system. Okay, any questions about that? No, everybody's happy? All right, so number 3, these goggles, scratched, old, and made of plastic, used for skiing. Okay, so we've got goggles, right? Goggles, that's going to be our head noun. That's going to come at the end. All right, and we've got these, which is a determiner. So that's going to come at the beginning. Right, so we've got to fit in scratched, old, made of plastic, and used for skiing. Okay, well, when we've got used for, normally in English, that's going to mean that you can make some kind of compound, right? So used for skiing, goggles used for skiing, we can simply shorten to ski goggles. Okay? It could be skiing goggles, but in fact, ski goggles is fine. So we're going to use as a head noun, not just goggles, but ski goggles. Okay. Then we've got scratched, old, made of plastic. So as I said, accidental things which are not always true of an object, are going to come first. All right. So that means that old, which is true now but didn't used to be true of this object, is going to come first. Scratched, on the other hand, is a part of the physical description, but it's also something which is true now but wasn't presumably when they were made. Okay. So it's also somehow making a comment on the goggles themselves, but it is still part of the physical description in a way that old is not. So we get these old, scratched, and of course made of plastic, we can just shorten to plastic. These old, scratched, plastic ski goggles. Okay. Now the last two are slightly more interesting. We have to be more creative with these ones. So we've got the incident which happened to us by the sea, rather unfortunate. So again, what's the head noun? Well, the head noun is incident. All right. We've got we've got an article, so that's going to come at the beginning, we think. Okay. That's what we think at first. But in fact, things are going to change a little bit. So we're going to end with incident. Now we've got to put in rather unfortunate. Okay. We don't need to change rather unfortunate. And that's obviously a comment on the whole incident, right? It's not a description, it's not a more integral description of the incident, it's my comment on it. So that's obviously going to come quite near the beginning. The problem is then how to get in the fact that it happened to us by the sea, how to turn that into a pre-modifier, because that's the typical sort of thing that's typical post-modification with a relative clause, right? That's the sort of post-modification we see all the time. So the way to make clear that it happened to us, we can simply take us and turn that into the determiner. Okay, so we get rid of the determiner and we make us the determiner, so that we get the beginning of the phrase is our. Okay. Now, the fact that something happened to you doesn't necessarily always mean that it's yours in this sense, but in fact, here there's no problem with doing it like that. So it's our. Okay, we've got rather unfortunate. We know that's an opinion, so that's going to come first. So our rather unfortunate, and then we need something from it happened by the sea. Well, there's a simple pre-modifier from by the sea, which is seaside. Okay. So we can say our rather unfortunate seaside incident. Okay. And here we see these are rather more, as I said, they're more interesting, more creative, but they're also more realistic examples, because the examples where you just have a simple list of adjectives, I mean, they're pretty easy, but they're also quite boring. I mean, nobody really cares about such things. What's much more interesting is when you actually have to write something in English. Okay, and you've got a phrase that you know what you want to say, or maybe you've got the phrase in Polish or in another language. You've got that phrase, and it would work as a post modifier, but it's somehow that's not going to fit what you're doing. Then you need to be able to think creatively and put it. So even if you're doing translations, sometimes you might have a phrase which you could translate as "which happened to us by the sea," but it turns out that actually it would fit better if you said "our seaside." Okay, so this sort of flexibility, this sort of understanding of what you can do with the language is really what's important at an advanced level when you're actually going to use the language in real situations to create something good. Okay, the last one is maybe even more difficult. So we've got the estate belonging to the Queen, which sprawls across the countryside and is quite magnificent. Okay, if you don't know what sprawl means, which is quite possible, sprawl is like lie. So it lies across the countryside. The sprawl particularly has this meaning of being sort of spread out over a big distance. So if you say that somebody is sprawled, it normally means, like, if someone's sprawled on the floor, it normally means that their arms and legs are all off in different directions, right? So if someone's lying on their bed asleep, curled up in a ball, then you couldn't say they were sprawled across their bed. Whereas someone who collapses drunk onto their bed with their arms up and their legs out, then we would say they were sprawled. Okay. So this estate, we can assume that because this is a piece of land, that it's not. I mean, it's not a square. So it goes off in different directions, and it's a bit of a sort of messy shape. Okay, but it covers a lot of ground. That would be what's being suggested. Okay. So the main thing we're talking about is an estate. Okay, so estate is going to be our head noun. That's going to come at the end. Again, we've got the. So we might think that the will come first, but we should see fairly quickly we've got belonging to the Queen. Okay, so rather than putting the as the from the estate as our first word, we actually want to say that it belongs to the Queen first. Right, so we're going to use that determiner. So the structure of determinant, the Queen's. Right, so it's the Queen's estate. Okay. So we've got the Queen's something estate. What we know is that it sprawls across the countryside and it's quite magnificent. So obviously quite magnificent we can very easily turn into a pre-modifier, is quite magnificent. We just take away the is and we end up with the Queen's quite magnificent estate. Okay. Now we've got sprawls across the countryside. Now we're not going to get one pre-modifier, which means sprawls across the countryside. Okay. That's too much information. So we need to get one which is sprawls and one which is countryside. So instead of saying something that something sprawls, okay, we can say something is sprawling, and we can use sprawling as a pre-modifier. So then we get the Queen's quite magnificent sprawling estate. Obviously, sprawling, it's also a word with some sort of evaluative sense to it, but it's also more a physical description than quite magnificent. Quite magnificent means that's just my opinion, whereas sprawling does tell us something about the actual physical structure of this estate. Okay, so what do we get? So then we're left with countryside. Okay, and countrysides we don't normally use. I mean, technically you could perhaps, but we don't normally use as a pre-modifier. So, but it's very simple because we can simply use the word country as the pre-modifier instead. And so we end up with the Queen's quite magnificent, sprawling country estate. Okay? And country estate, we can say, actually forms a compound noun as the head of our phrase. Okay, so that is everything that I've got prepared in those exercises. So I am ready now for any questions that might have occurred to you over the last nearly an hour. But since there haven't been any questions so far, I'm also quite prepared for the fact that there might not be any more questions. So I'll just wait for a moment. Are there any questions at all about the content? No. Okay, so I'll just say something else briefly to finish off about the organizational things. So there is still supposed to be one more online test. Okay, so it's online, it's a test. Yeah. which I was going to kind of try to do it for this week, but then I thought, actually, there's not much point. I might as well do it after this lecture rather than telling you to do it and then do this lecture. So at some point in the next few days, there will be another little online test. And you will have to do that before we do the final test in person. But that's going to be, well, possibly at the end of August. I suspect probably September. I'm quite happy for people to let me know what they think about that, about what the best timing would be. I don't know if you know anything about the exams you're going to have. I know I don't want to do it at a time, obviously, when some of you can't come and then have to do it at a different occasion. So what I would like to do, I think, is if either at the end of August or more likely at the beginning of September, that we can meet in Łódź and maybe have an hour where we would go through everything and a sort of revision for the whole course in 1 hour. We can manage that. And then have a quick break. And then we would do the final test and do it in person. And that will be the main part of your mark, obviously. If there's any problem with that, you can either let me know now or write to me and tell me there's a problem with that. As I said, I need to get in touch with the secretaries to find out when other people are going to do their exams. Try to schedule a time and a place, but there's plenty of time to do that. So there's no hurry with that. But that's the way that I see things going. So you won't get any grades now. Everything will wait until after the summer, and I very much hope that we'll be able to meet. I thought we could have tried to do the final test over the internet, but the fact that we haven't actually met at all bothers me slightly. I feel like we ought to at least meet once, so I know that you really exist. Not that I particularly doubt that you exist, but you know what I mean. But as I said, if anybody has a problem with that or thinks that there's going to be there's a better way of doing it, let me know. But that is my plan. Okay. Okay. So if nobody has any questions or comments, funny stories, anecdotes, no. No. Okay. So in that case, I'm going to finish and wish you all a very good summer. Hopefully, slightly better summer than we've had spring. And I do very much hope that we'll be able to meet at the end of the summer. And so I will put, of course, information on the website as soon as I have it. But I guess I'll send an email to the class emails as well, and you'll probably get information from your different secretaries. It's a little bit awkward, so because you're from different groups, so you have different secretaries, and you all have different exams. So it's a little awkward to arrange things, which is why normally I do this final test or exam during the course, before the course finishes, so I don't have to worry about different people having different exams at different times. But we'll sort something out. We've got plenty of time. Okay, so I'll just finish off by apologizing for the fact that we've had to do the course in this way. Obviously, it's not my fault, but you know what I mean. And I can tell you, it would have been a lot more fun if we'd done it together, because my lectures are normally fun, but it's difficult to have fun when you're just recording things and posting them and you don't see anybody's reactions. Descriptive grammar can be fun, kind of, a little bit. So it's a shame we didn't get the chance to explore that possibility. But anyway, all right, I'm going to finish. So look out for a little test online, which will come on the website in the next few days. There's no hurry to do it. It should be done before you finish the course, which will not be for some time. So there's no hurry with that. Right, okay, I've got dinner to cook, so I'm going to go and do that, and you can get on with whatever it is that you've got to do, which is more interesting than listening to me. So if there are no final comments, I shall say goodbye and finish. There are no final comments. Okay, if you think of any questions, you know where to reach me. Okay, So have a good summer and goodbye.